Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on your Tuesday. My name's Maria Marquis. Here at Coda, I focus on customer education, celebrating our makers, and just making it as easy as possible for people to start to approach Coda so they can solve the problems that they have both in their business and maybe in their life as well. Now, just a little bit of a note here. We're doing this new series. This is a couple of weeks old. I think this is our fourth one, Ale, that we're calling Maker Stories, which allows us to sit down with a Coda maker, take a look at their doc, something that they've built, walk through their process, how the doc works, how they use it, and also give all of you the opportunity to ask any and all questions you might have of people just like you using Coda in their day-to-day. So that's me. Ale, do you want to introduce yourself to the group? Let them know a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Sure. Thank you, Maria. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alessandro Pintaudi, and I currently live in Barcelona, so quite far from where Maria is based. I work as product director in a French scale-up named Payfit. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's a B2C SaaS that helps HR to better handle payroll and HR processes.
Nice.
And today I'm going to talk about the product development and growth document that I put together a couple of months ago in order to better manage the different aspects of the product development.
Awesome. Yeah, Ale and I were talking before the session that I am starting my day. He is ending his day. And we're both on opposite sides there. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to grab a link to your doc, Alessandro, so that folks can also snag it. So if you're interested in this doc, there it is. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into Alessandro's doc. Over on the right, there's a chat field, and you can use that at any point in time today. Post whatever's on your mind. That's your place. Feel free. I'm keeping a very close eye on that. But if you have a question, I would love it if you would just use the Ask a Question button along the bottom of the screen. That way it doesn't get lost, I don't miss it, and I can make sure that we get all of your questions answered, because really that's what we're here to do today. We want to make sure that everything that's on your mind, we give you a place to go next and something to think about. So feel free at any point in time. You don't have to wait for me and Ale to stop talking. That is your spot for getting in touch with us. Also, this will be recorded, so we do have that available on our Crowdcast channel as well as on our YouTube channel, so both of those are available to you. All right, so without further ado, Alessandro, let's talk through where did you have the idea to document kind of your approach to product? Like, where did that idea come from?
Well, that's a good question, because one of the problems I was trying to solve was how to give more visibility to the different members of the team. Back last year, I was working in a company in which we're divided into different squads. I was currently, at the time, overlooking at different product lines, and in each product line, there was a squad responsible for it. And one of the problems we're trying to solve was how to give more visibility to the different team members, but also to external stakeholders into the different phases of our product life cycle, to synchronize business teams, but also to make sure that a developer or designer that was not overlooking at the whole phases of the development process was currently aware of where we stood and be ready for the next step.
Yeah, and then what were some of the tools that you were using in the past? Like, what were some of the tools that are always kind of saved on your desktop, or things that you use to manage both that internal, external combination? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we used a variety of tools. So from Notion to GitHub, Jira, Trello board, lots of Trello board, and everything was a bit messy. Like, you could find information here and there, and there was not a single place in which you could have in one glance a full picture of where we stood and the status, basically, of each iteration of the product development process.
Got it. Nice. So let's take a look at this doc. Let's take a look at some of the things that that are part of it, that how you built it and how you use it. What are the tools that we're looking at here?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first page, it basically summarizes a bit the concept and the principle of the document. The idea is to give this tool to product managers, for example, that need to have this holistic approach and see the whole phases of the product life cycle, and typically divided in three main phases. So the discovery, in which we try to find real customer problems. solutions in which the team collaboratively try to ideate, eventually prototype, and finally test the different ideas to then develop it, measure it, and then iterate all over again. So the ingredient, obviously, it's to have a team, collaborative team, a cross-functional team.
It's a good place to start.
Exactly. Clear objectives in order to set the direction, and then a lean process in order to go faster and don't get stuck into overloaded processes in which the team can really lose lots of time and then forget about delivering value to the clients. So I'm going to get started with the first part, which is more like the configuration part, in a sense, in which you can find the different squads, and you can here there's just some example. There's lots. There's my picture in many squads, but you can fill it with your own team member. Obviously, it's split by different roles, and so you can have basically the whole picture of how your team is made of. The second part is to give a direction to the team. So typically, most of the team nowadays are working with OKRs. You can have them at quarterly basis, yearly basis, or even more frequent basis. But the idea is to keep track of where we stand in terms of the objective we're trying to achieve and how we're measuring them with the key results. So in here, basically, the team sets the OKRs. And in the third part of these configuration of these documents, there are the different product features. The product features serves to give an overview to the team on the different type of product lines is currently overlooking at, and the main job that these specific features is trying to accomplish for the final users. We'll see in the next session how it can be useful to fill it in before getting started.
Yeah, I love this idea that you've sort of set it up as like, all right, here's what I'm thinking about. And then before you do anything else, you should know these 3 ingredients. You got to know who you're working with, what are you working on, and then kind of a more granular, what is the stuff that we're actually working with. And I like that, like by doing that up front, it kind of just lets you then use everything else a lot more efficiently. I also love in your team section that you use the icon column type to show number of people. With like just little person icon. I think I love that. It's like, I gotta steal that. I gotta steal that idea. Awesome. Cool.
All right. And so now we can walk through the real part of the document, divided in 3 different phases. So the discovery, the solution, the development. We'll get started first with the discovery, in which the first section it's about trying to identify the problems we want to tackle. Basically here, any member of the team, through different techniques, is storing the different problems that is preventing the team from achieving this objective that was set.
Very cool.
So in here, we just give a glance of how the problem looked like. Is not meant to replace other tools like a knowledge-based system that the company is currently using, because one of the problems we run was, well, if the team is using Notion or other tools to store knowledge, then we don't want necessarily to replace it, but we do provide a link in order to get more information about it.
Love that.
And so here you can organize it by priority. So in here we put 4 priorities, but you can also have it by timeline. So you might want to group it by the current problem you're trying to tackle, the medium one, and the long-term one as well.
One thing I love about what you've done here is you made it so that anybody on the team can click that add a problem button and flag it. So it's not just one person who has to take all of that information from the notes and put it in, but it's a way for everybody, particularly if you're distributed, to be able to go like, oh, hey, this is an issue. I want to flag it. Let's talk about it. I love that it's a tiny little feature, but I think it's a super effective way of creating that equality on the team. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you can also think about exposing it externally to different teams and have them doing the job for you at some point as well.
I love when that happens. Like, how can I get people to do the thing I need to do? Yes, nice.
That's right, yeah. And the next sections of the discovery part basically involves the different steps that the team could be doing in order to gather more insight on this problem. So they can start from gathering insights from the industry and the market leaders by doing some benchmark. And so here you have a little Kanban in which it tells you where you are on the analysis of this specific problem in terms of benchmark.
Right.
The team might want to do some qualitative analysis. So it might want to start gathering user feedback via user interviews, surveys, focus group, or other technique that they want to employ in order to better understand what the problem is about, basically. And once you know it and you store all this information, then you might also want to quantify it. So you need to find quantitative evidence that backs up this insight and tells you what's going to be the impact in terms of quantitative numbers on the users or on the business, depending on the objective you're trying to tackle. And all this information are helping you to better qualify the problem and to create the typical one-pager. So at the end of that, if you've done your job right, then you will have in the briefs part a summary with all the problems and the link to the resource, and eventually these forms, let's say your one-pager document, you can also link it to a different section as well in a Notion page, but it gives you in a glance how your problem is look like from a benchmark perspective, from a user feedback perspective, qualitative and quantitative analysis as well.
And then as I'm looking at this, is that looking up to under the teams and goals section, is that looking up to the product features that you have listed there? Is that connected?
Yeah, so basically, that's right. So you can link the problem to a specific feature, and that tells you exactly where the problem is. So it can be for a specific device, but also linked to a specific feature. So in here, basically, you can link the different features that you created in a configuration setting, which helps you to pinpoint where exactly the problem is, so that when you run benchmark, user feedback, and that analysis, you know what it's about.
Nice. And I love how you're using linking together, because even though, I'm totally biased, like I love Coda, I use Coda for all the things, but I also totally acknowledge that sometimes you do need other tools to help you get the job done. And I like how you've included links here so that Coda can still be that place of, I know exactly where I need to go. I just go to that Coda doc for our team, but it allows you to kind of connect to the other ancillary information you might need, like, or even just like, here's a website that I think shows our color scheme really well, or here is an article that I really like, or here's a study that I found that's really interesting, or here's a page in our wiki. That using the kind of flexible nature of that, you can have all of the information that you need in one area, so that the brief is really a full brief, which is great. I also like how you're using detail display here, so you can like go through, here are the projects that we are actively working through, and all of the data behind it. Very cool.
Exactly.
Nice.
All right. So that's basically it for the first part, which is the discovery, in which you can have the summary always in the first section of the 3 different phases. So here you can find a sort of recap with where you stand in terms of problem to be solved. Then let's move down to the solution part, where the team really gather together and try to find the best solution to solve this problem.
Nice.
So everything starts by formulating hypothesis. You got a problem, and you might have an idea on how you want to solve it. You're not talking about a solution that solves it yet, but you're trying to define really high level how it could be solving it through assumptions or a proper hypothesis declaration. And you do that at this stage in order to make sure that once you go through the development process, you can decide whether you validate your assumptions or hypothesis or you invalidate it. It's really important, because most of the time the teams do this exercise at the end of it when it's no longer relevant, and try always to define success when probably it wasn't there.
And we did a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still all right, because you learn from failures as well, as long as you get the learnings out of that.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry. Was I correct in seeing in the previous, in your hypothesis area, or not hypothesis, the idea area, that you could create a hypothesis from that spot? Was that correct? Did I see that in the
that's
previous?
right.
Great. Cool.
So you can create a new hypothesis and you can group it between the one that you've already tested, the one currently in testing, and the one that you did already test.
Got it.
It's important, I think, to set up the key success metrics in order to understand how you're going to measure and what's your definition for success, and link it as well to your key results. So whatever you're doing, you know that is going to be ultimately towards one goal that you already define into your configuration part of the document.
So then the key result is looking up to the OKRs that you placed earlier.
Right.
And then success metrics, is that just a select list where you're entering in things, or is that populated elsewhere too?
Yeah, today it doesn't come up from any list. It's really like up to the team to define success metric at this stage. But eventually you can define a success metric for each product feature as well, and then get it from that list as well.
Totally. And I'll say, if anybody is like, oh, I've started making select lists, because there's nothing wrong with select lists. I use them all the time. But if you're like, oh, I made a select list, and now I actually think maybe I want it to be its own separate table so I can add extra information, you can always, when you're in the column format menu, you can always choose to convert it to a table, and it'll automatically make it for you. So you have that ability. Yeah. So you can always, you don't have to worry if you've missed the opportunity. You haven't. You can always go back and do that. Awesome. Just wanted to put a little educational point there, but yeah, go for it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I can't help myself. I'm like, I gotta teach people.
That's good. All right. And so once you have your hypothesis formulated, then you might want to rank them and trying to understand which of the different hypotheses that were formulated we want to tackle it first. And so here, basically, we have a Perization matrix made of impact and effort. The team can go on an ice, adding the confidence as well. It can change different prioritization score. But the idea is really to have the hypothesis that is about to solve the problem clearly framed with an impact and effort in order to decide in the graph below which ones are the quick wins you might want to tackle first based on this estimation that the team has made.
Yeah, I love the bubble chart view that you did there. I never thought of doing that for product analysis, but I love how it just very quickly shows you this is the stuff that we can do very easily. This is the stuff that's going to take us more time, but we know that it's going to be, we want to go to the upright. That's great. Yeah.
Right. And once you decide what you want to work on, you can start prototyping or trying to find the right solution that solves that problem. So in here, you might have several ideas to solve the same problem based on the same hypothesis that you formulated. So here, the team really can explore different solutions. And the idea is not to develop them all. The idea will be to make sure that the design or depending on the team structure, the solution is being properly framed.
Right.
Internal or external stakeholders can vote for it, not just to validate the idea, but more to prioritize which one we want to test first.
Yeah.
Because we should always test it against real users. And so here is just to give the visibility to the team on where we stand in terms of solution definition, to then test each solution against real users. So here we have basically the 4 different phases in which we have all the ideas linked to a specific hypothesis that we want to test within a given time frame against real users. Some ideas might be validated and others will be unvalidated. And so it will just be discarded.
Yeah. And I love, though, that you still have the record of this is something we tried. This is something we tested. It ended up not having the impact we thought it was, but we're not just removing it. That's also part of our learning to be able to understand, okay, this was something that didn't work. I wonder why. it didn't work. And having the full record. And I love that you're using the visual here too. So this is an image column, everybody. You can add a column type that allows you to just upload an image or a link to an image URL. So if you've got, a file where you're putting together mockups, or if you've got something from a prototype website, you can just take that screenshot, pop it in here, and be able to see it in that kind of presentation type view, so that everybody can go ahead and vote on things and have a good understanding of what is being proposed. Excellent.
Right, because you still have maybe the link to Sketch, Abstract,
for sure,
or Figma, or whatever tool you're using, but you still want to provide a glance to your team on what it's about.
That shorthand of like, oh, that's right, the don't go away for the holidays idea.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, we use something similar here with our product teams. We use Figma very heavily. Our designers. I look at the Figma files, but our designers use Figma very heavily, and they'll do the same thing as far as here's a link to the full Figma file with all the stuff, but they always include a couple frames and images so that people can see, this is what we're talking about. And then if we're in a meeting, we can be just moving through very quickly and having a clear understanding of what's being proposed. Excellent.
Nice. And so the third phase of the development process is the actual development. So we
actually got to do work.
Exactly. So we actually need to build stuff, but the work that we've done beforehand allows us to save resources in order not to work on things that was not important enough for the business to achieve the objective, but only on what really is going to bring value to both the customers and the business as well.
Right.
We have our link to the business objectives. We tested our ideas against the users, and so now we can really get started experimenting. And so in the first section of this phase, we can find a list with all upcoming experiments. So each idea is linked to one specific experiment. Depending on whether you're a B2B or a B2C, you might want to do A/B tests or not. You have defined your success metric beforehand, so you know how you're going to measure it.
Yes.
And not only after you develop it. and you need to define a time box activity for this experiment. You cannot have this experiment running forever, so you need to define a start and an end.
Right.
And here you can basically overlook at your experiment dashboard, in which you can see for each product features what you're currently testing. So you make sure you're not testing at the same time different improvements of the same feature. And you know when one is going to start and is going to end, in order to properly set the team to work on the next big thing or the next experiment, because you have an overview on really what's currently being built.
I hadn't thought about how valuable this Gantt chart view is until you started talking, but the idea that sometimes I find for myself, if I've got a bunch of information in a table, I understand that very differently than if it's visualized. Right? I wouldn't necessarily catch, these two experiments might be interfering with each other, or they might make muddy our data, or, you know what, we're actually putting something first that maybe it's building off of something else. We want to put it there, so that this Gantt chart is kind of a way for you to go, all right, this testing plan, I understand it in a new way. It looks like it's going to work, and being able to very quickly notice if there's any issues that might happen. Or if you're looking at results and being like, wow, this is really confusing. Why is this showing up this way? You can kind of see how the experiments play together, which I hadn't really fully understood until you showed me this and had that little note. I love that. Excellent.
Right. And like you said, it's not about setting deadlines for the team to finish something on time, but it's really about setting time box activities once the development has been ended and shipped to production, to really start the experimentation part and really activate it for the users, and then measure within that specific time frame the results.
Excellent.
So the next part is really how we get these into production. So the team might still want to, as we're working on a cross-functional team, and the experiment might involve different people. It can involve internal members of the team, so designers, engineers, but external teams as well. It might involve marketing. It might involve a customer care department. And so we really want to have in one single place an overview on where we stand on the different tasks in order to achieve a specific experiment. Right. Again, here, the goal is not to replace any Jira board or GitHub or Trello, but is really just to give an overview on where we stand in terms of task needed in order to accomplish a specific experiment. So really, you can add your own link to the existing tools and just help you to visualize where you stand into the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. And I will say something that our own team does here at Coda, because we also use GitHub and we also use, we don't use Jira, but we have a lot of customers who do, is we've got packs for both GitHub and Jira and also Figma, which is really valuable for us. And our team actually kind of pulls in using the packs, the GitHub or the Figma details. So you can jump out to that very easily and like pull in data that you might need as far as, what's the status of a pull request or something like that. So a way to, again, kind of create those connections where you need it. So you don't need to be frantically clicking around and searching for the thing. You can actually bring them all together in one spot. So you can just link out as you need to. Yeah. Excellent.
Right. And so the next two sections of this phase, I included them in the development phase, but for their importance, they could easily be split in a fourth phase, because here we're really talking about measuring.
Right.
But I really wanted to insist on the importance of measuring any single development that has been made. And so in here, the teams, what they can do is define basically whether the outcome had any change whatsoever in the expected behavior, whether it validated or unvalidated the initial hypothesis based on the success metrics that we define. We're going to measure that. And it can still be a failure as long as we keep trace of the key learnings from the failure. Because maybe behavior was not what we expected, but we can still learn from it. And the team can really then iterate based on these learnings, because it will have a knowledge base in the last section in which you can find all the different learnings based on the different product features and understand what worked and what didn't and why it didn't work. And iterate from there as well.
And I could see if you had a new person join the team, sometimes if you're new, like you don't have all of the, obviously you don't have all of the knowledge of what the team's done. And you might have ideas like, oh, have we tried this? And then people are like, oh yeah, we did. But this allows you, if you're new, to fully understand the scope of that segment of the product and everything that's happened, why we did things, why we didn't do things, what are the things we learned, so that your hypotheses and ideas can automatically be up to the same level as folks who've been working on something for a long time, and really understanding how to frame that up. And I also find, I don't know if you find this, Alessandro, but if we're moving in a really fast-paced product organization, sometimes it could be hard to remember, like, what did we do last month? I don't even know. And I love that you're valuing the whole life cycle of a product, from we're just thinking about what to do to really completing it, not just shipping it, but really understanding what you've shipped and how you're impacting the baseline, which is, to me, I think something that level of rigor doesn't always happen. And that's where we get into trouble of going through extra cycles and all of that. So excellent.
Absolutely. And in the end, the bottom line is to achieve your objectives that you set at the beginning. So as long as you don't achieve them, then you can always try new things out and get new learnings from that and start all over the process again.
And as I'm looking at like the structure of this doc, something I think that's really valuable is you're kind of linking each bit together using those different elements that you started off using at the very top, right? Everything is connected to an OKR or a product feature. Hypotheses are always connected to ideas and problems. And then the development work is always connected to the hypothesis, that it's kind of like you're stringing it along so that each learning or each kind of thought that you have in every phase follows you forward. And then you can actually go back and be like, okay, wait, why did we all think this was important? Let's figure it out. Which, is a simple solution, but ends up being so valuable, I could imagine, for a team trying to keep their bearings and understand what they're doing. Excellent.
That's right.
So, Alessandro, anything else about this doc that you think is important for folks to see or experience? Anything else?
Well, I think that the essence of it in the end, it's always the first section of the three different phases.
Mhm.
So in the discovery, it's really about to identify the right problem, and the
Mhm.
solution is to properly ideate or formulate the right
Yep.
hypothesis. And then into the development is really to organize your
Mm.
experimentation uh, or experiments
Yeah.
in order to then get results and eventually start iterating all over again. So
Mhm.
at some point, new learnings can generate new problems to solve,
Right.
and then we can start all over the process again.
Yeah. So then I think it might be helpful. Do you want to walk us through kind of how you and a team use this doc? Is this something that you primarily use, the team uses? Like, what does that look like over the course of a project?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, probably PMs are the ones that find this document most useful
Hmm.
because they need somehow to maintain this holistic view on
Sure.
where the development process stands and
Mhm.
properly communicate to internal and external stakeholders
Mhm.
and make sure that all the teams are aligned and as well when uh, a feature is ready to be released, then make sure that the business is ready to sell it. And
Yes.
if you are in a SaaS, if you are in e-commerce or B2C business, you still want to get the team prepared in case they receive questions
Hmm.
from real customers. And so the idea is that the document can really be a collaborative tool. So you might have a person like the PM, which might be interested in every single phase. But the idea is that if the PM is more responsible to find out which are the problems to find, then the product designers, if there's anyone 100% allocated to the team, is the one that owns or is main responsible for the solution part. As
Sure.
well as your engineering manager or the tech lead is going to be responsible to monitor closely the development part.
Mhm.
And if every single team member is going to use these as a reference document in order to monitor the process where we stand, then it's not going to be one man job to update the different phases, but it's
Right.
going to be a very collaborative
Mhm.
effort in order to maintain this document up to date.
Yeah. That really, I think you make an excellent point there that everybody needs to be able to have what they need to get their job done in this same
Right.
space. Otherwise, it's not going to be valuable, right? Like if I, as the engineering manager, don't have a clear picture of where it's coming from or why we're building it this way or the specs, then I'm not going to use it. So really making sure that every part of the team has all of the context they need. Also, hey Thomas, welcome. Good to have you. Thomas says hello. Perfect. Alessandro, what would be some advice that you would give to other makers who are thinking about really rigorously documenting a process for whatever their area of specialty might be? Because what you've done here is you've really made your entire process on a piece of paper, if you will, and
Right.
allowing people to move through it. So, what advice would you give to other folks who are thinking about doing something similar?
I think I will probably tell them to start small.
Hmm.
Uh, like, let's not get into defining a process from scratch or a document that is
Yeah.
too big for what we really need the document to be used for. You should test your assumptions, your riskiest assumption at the very beginning. So, for example, if the team is not going to like your document because he needs to rely on Sketch, Figma, or Abstract, and you don't have an integration or you don't find a way to link the two different tools,
Hmm.
then you're going to build the best document, but then your teams are not going to use it.
Hmm.
So if you iterate the construction of the document as well as you iterate the development process,
Yes.
then you're going to create a document that in the end is really going to fit your needs, and you're going to test it against your users. So in this case, your
Mhm.
team members or external people as well, to see how they feel about using it and what they miss on this document. And then you can start this process of improving it based on their feedback as well.
Yeah, I love that it's like, oh, I designed this just like I would any other product, right? Anything else, I would make sure that I understand the problems that we're trying to solve, that I create a bunch of ideas of how to solve it, that I ask my users how, like, which of these is most important to them. I test it. And then I understand, I get feedback from people, and then I'd be able to build more. I also just think it's really funny, Alessandro, because every single maker that I've talked to in this Maker Stories series, everybody to a person says start small is the best advice that they can give to people, and I completely agree. You know, this doc is big, it's beautiful, it's got so much going on, it's awesome, but knowing that it all started from just one tiny thing, and then, oh, you know what, I wonder if this would help, I'm going to make a little iteration, oh, you know, maybe that one didn't work as well, I'm going to try this out again. And I just love that there's kind of that unifying factor across any doc, you know, whether it's, you know, documentation in a full process, a playlist, a personal thing, that starting small is always the best thing that we can do for ourselves when we're building something new, which I love that we all agree on that.
Right.
And actually thinking about iterations, for this process and this doc, are there any iterations that you can particularly remember? Like, oh, I tried this, didn't work, and now I want to, this is my new adjustment?
Yeah, I mean, I probably went through 50 or more iterations before having the final document ready, you know, and at the beginning, the process itself was not clear in my mind either. So
sure,
I started with just a very simple Kanban board, replicating what could be a Trello board. And from there, I started adding things along the way based on what I currently needed and based on what the team members needed. I started sharing the document and see what kind of feedback I was getting, whether teams were using it or not, and what was missing. So, I mean, again, it's really like learning from using this document and build little pieces step by step. And I remember that I struggle, for example, in creating those links that you're saying, you know, they're beautiful and they're giving you a connection between one section and another. But at the beginning, I didn't have them, and I couldn't find a way to make these homogeneous and have the team to give a team a sort of reference of why we're doing these, why are we creating this idea, why are we formulating these hypotheses, and it all started back to the OKRs. So if we didn't have a way to link the OKRs to the hypothesis, there was no meaning for having the second phase actively used by the team. So I really remember that the links part was one key phase of during the iterations that went through.
Yeah. Well, and I think you make a good point that sometimes you don't know what you need until you experience one way of doing something. Like, oh, okay, we like these things, but man, there's a missing piece. And you wouldn't necessarily know that without testing it with your team and you yourself using it and trying to make it work. I mean, like, oh, here's what we can do. Let's add that linkage. And now all of a sudden we've solved a big problem for ourselves. So I think, you know, using Alessandro's product development growth process as you're thinking about building a doc that's going to really take a big part of your team's process is a good way of approaching it. Like thinking about, okay, let's actually really outline what is the problem that we're experiencing right now? How could we solve it? And if you don't know how to solve it, that's where me and my team come in. So you can always get in touch with us at support@coda.io or head to the community. I'll pop the link into chat, community.coda.io. That's a great place to talk to other makers just like Alessandro, like Thomas, like our wonderful Coda champions out there. So anytime you're struggling with something, reach out, because there are hundreds, if not thousands of people who are ready to help you, either here at Coda or other makers just like you. So please do not hesitate to reach out with questions. We're always here to help. So then, Alessandro, what would you say is kind of the biggest learning you had creating this doc, either about Coda or your own process?
Well, I think you cannot start from deciding necessarily a tool
Mm,
before having clear in your mind what the process is going to look like. So
yeah.
uh, the good thing of Coda is that you create the tool along the way. You shape the tool based on your needs and based on the process that you're going to create. Um,
Yeah.
if I knew from the beginning how the process would look like, then I would have probably looked directly for a tool that could help me to better organize this process. And because I didn't tested it, maybe it would have not fit all the needs.
Hmm.
So starting with Coda gives you these possibility and this flexibility of shaping your needs uh, based on the ongoing, based on the findings that you gather while you build it and while you start using it.
Yeah.
Because you might start with a Trello board, but then it can evolve into something bigger than that,
Mhm.
as it end up being this document,
Yeah.
uh, which was not the primary intention at the beginning. It
Mhm.
was just supposed to be a better Trello board uh, with more links and
Yeah.
uh,
Well, and it's cool because I can see in this doc like the seeds of your original process, right? Like, oh, your team clearly likes working with Kanban views, right? Your team likes
right.
that card being able to move things around. So of course you're going to want to preserve that in this doc. And then like, okay, we have all these other tools that we're using. We've got this wiki that we're working on. We've got Jira. We've got sort of GitHub things. We need to make sure we bring that in too. So I can see like the foundation of that core process, and then that you've just added that next level of like, okay,
Yeah,
now that we have our Kanban view centralized, let's make sure that we connect that with all of the contextual information, the OKRs, the team, the product features, so that we can have that better understanding. And I think with any good Coda doc, starting with where you are is always a great idea. Really figuring out like, what does my team like? Let's preserve the things we like. Let's throw away the things we don't like, and let's add what's missing, right? Being able to make those connections. Awesome. And
exactly.
actually,
Because you can't either force the team to change from one tool
mhm,
to another. You need to adapt and live with what you have based on the context and the situation in which you
mhm,
are.
yeah. And Alessandro, that's a good thing I was just thinking about. How did you find Coda?
Well, I find it really lovely. Like it gives you really lots of flexibility.
Mhm,
It's really easy to understand, to create new things,
mhm,
and to start testing. I
yeah.
mean, I created this document for product development and growth, but you can really do anything you like. You can start creating games, or you can start
Mhm,
creating tools as well. And really the power behind and the possibility you have in order to visualize things, in order to create functions and links between one another, I think is one of the most powerful uh, low code or no code tools out there in
yeah.
the market.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you find that because that's essentially that's why we exist. Like we wanted to make sure that we could create a flexible place for people to build whatever they wanted to, because far be it from us to tell you how to build the thing you want to build. Like we just want to be like, here's the blocks, make whatever you like,
Right.
use these however you want to. As far as this doc, is there anything that you would like to add to it? Like anything else that like, ooh, the next iteration, it might be neat to add this.
That's a good question. I mean, we talked about having teams not to switch necessarily from one tool to another. So I think the next iteration could be adding integrations with their
Mhm.
existing tools.
Sure.
Typically, you have a view in which the team is currently working on different tasks, but then
Mhm.
the detail of the task might be linked to a Jira ticket. And
Sure.
so you might want to push a few details with integration to the
Mhm.
Jira or to Trello board or to any other tool that the team is using, an integration with Figma if you want to better display
Yeah.
the design as well. So I think that could be one thing that could be
Mhm.
integrated into the document.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Um, Yeah. Another part I'm thinking of maybe could be better sourcing your problem. So there you have a way to add a new problem, but you can better specify a full process around where you get all those insights and eventually expose it to internal and external users.
Yeah. One thing, if any of you are thinking about trying to figure out how to manage your customer feedback process, we do have a Coda doc out in the gallery that is based on what our lovely customer champions do here at Coda, how we take all of that, because we get customer feedback from all different places, and we get all kinds of customer feedback, everything from "I really love this" to like "Why does this happen? I hate it." And so we want to be able to make sense of all of it, and also to be able to act on it. So that template that we have out there, it's a great way to not only allow you to source that information from anywhere, but also being able to then figure out, great, these are the people who had this request. How can we reach out to them in a more automated way? So definitely check that out. I will actually see if I can grab that for, yeah, Thomas, I'm going to see if I can grab that for you right now. Also, everybody, if there's any questions that you have for myself or Alessandro, please feel free, let me know. I'll be happy to answer any and all questions you have. I'm going to grab this customer feedback. I think this is the one. Just waiting for it to load. Yes, here we go. All right. So this is inspired by what our wonderful customer champion Charlotte made. We also have a crowdcast where Charlotte and I sat down and talked about it. So if you want to watch us talking about it, meet Charlotte in person, that's a great way to do it too. But what I like about this customer feedback hub is the reply to requests, because so often, we're really good about getting the feedback and analyzing the feedback, but not necessarily about closing the loop, right? So this has a built-in way for you to see, here are all the people who requested this. Let's send them all an email letting them know that it's now available. So I like that it really does that full circle, kind of like what Alessandro is doing here with the full circle of discovery all the way to really understanding how we measure the learnings and document the learnings. Awesome. Well, let's see. Last call for any all questions for Alessandro. Fantastic. All right. Well, Alessandro, I will let you get to your evening. Thank you so much for taking some of your time here today to walk us through your doc. I know I'm leaving feeling really inspired and excited about taking a look at some different ways that I can manage my own processes. Also, we do have a link to Alessandro's doc over there on the right. Alessandro, is there anything before we sign off for today that you want to promote or plug? Anything that you're working on that people should check out, or where they can learn more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you guys are planning to move to Barcelona or to Paris, I mean, we're looking for product people in our company as well. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to have a chat.
Excellent. Paris and Barcelona are sounding pretty good, I will say.
Two really good destinations. So, but I guess you guys in San Francisco can't complain either.
It's all okay here, you know. But we don't have as many croissants or as many delicious treats for Barcelona either.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Well, thanks again for having me here.
Of course. Oh, hey, Thomas is from Bilbao. Nice.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ali. This has been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you around the community.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Take care.